It wasn't as well done as it could have been.
What emotion in your body has
I'm Jill Stevens-Fleischer. I teach the Department of Sociology. I have two minor roles this evening. I've been invited to be the keeper of the time. My other, more playful role is to introduce to you our moderator for this evening, which is Dr. Amy Story. I have a PhD behind my name, but she really is a true doctor of philosophy. She's in her first year here in the Department of Philosophy at Baldwin-Wallace College. She's assistant professor. Her research and teaching interests focus on ethics, 20th century French theory, and issues related to gender difference.
I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for coming. Just a note, if you haven't turned off your cell phone, we appreciate it. I don't know.
It's not.
Okay. I'll just tell you a little bit about how the evening's going to flow, and then I will turn it over, providing a brief introduction myself to each of the speakers, and then allowing them to have some opening remarks. After those opening remarks, we will have a series of questions which will be addressed to one or the other of our speakers today, and then will be rebutted by the other, each of them having 5 minutes to address each question. At the end of our series of questions, we will solicit questions from the audience, which you can write on note cards, which are scattered around the room already, and we'll then collect those, and I will select a handful of questions for our debaters to address then. And at the very end, they will each have their opportunity for 10 minutes of closing remarks. Okay. Caleb T. Maupin is a sophomore at Baldwin-Wallace College, majoring in political science. He currently writes for Maelstrom, The Exponent, Workers' World newspaper, and is the local organizer for Fight Imperialism, Stand Together, or FIST, a socialist youth group. He recently became a full member of the Workers' World Party, a revolutionary Marxist-Leninist organization. He will be arguing in favor of socialism.
I think we'll turn it on, then we can get started here.
Oh.
All right, well, I wanted to start out by saying, that I want to thank Tim Davey for agreeing to this debate, first of all, because I thank you for agreeing to this. I think this is a great night, and though we might all not agree with each other at the end of the night, I think we're all going to come out of this much better informed about things. So, I wanted to start off with what made me a socialist. What was it that attracted me to the idea of socialism? And essentially, it was when I was growing up, I was reading a lot of history. And I learned about a time in the history of this country where people worked for literally pennies an hour. And I learned about a time in the history of this country where people worked 12-hour shifts in mines and mills. And I learned about a time in the history of this country where children worked in factories. I hear horrible stories of people, children too small even to stand up on the assembly line, who had to stand up on a box to get up to the assembly line to work in that factory at ages of 5 or 6. I learned about a time in the history of this country where organizing a union was a crime. It was a crime to organize a union and fight against the way things were. And while all of this was going on, what did they say about the people organizing against all of this? What did they say about them? They said that the media and the newspapers, they said, these people that say they want higher wages and decent health care and benefits, they say they want that, but what they really want is socialism. They're a bunch of communists. And I went on to learn about a time in the history of this country where black men were being lynched by the Ku Klux Klan and by racists. Black men were being taken and hung from trees, their bodies mutilated by racist mobs. And people would pose for pictures next to these dangling corpses. That was the horror of what was going on. And Jim Crow and segregation. What did they say about the people that were organizing against all of this? What is it they said about them? They said, well, they say they want racial equality. They say they want justice. What they really want is socialism. They're a bunch of communists. And I went on to learn about the Vietnam War, one of the most ugly wars in history. 4 million Vietnamese lost their lives in that war. Much of the food in Vietnam is still infected with deadly chemicals this government sprayed on Vietnam during that war. And while that war was going on, and 58,000 young American men died in that war, and some of them are my relatives who are actually with their names carved on the wall. And while that war was going on, while that was going on, there were youth in the streets against it. There were people sitting in, there were people protesting out in the streets, demonstrating against it. And what did they say about them? They say they want peace. What they really want is socialism. They're a bunch of communists. And I learned that the first gay rights organization in this country was founded by Harry Hay, a proud member of the Communist Party. And I learned that women's liberation, there were many people in the struggle to get women the right to vote who were attracted to socialism and communism. The suffragists contained many socialists and many revolutionaries. And it was learning all of this that made me think, you know, maybe these communists, maybe these socialists, maybe they ain't so bad after all. And I say this at a time when we are in the middle of an economic crisis. People are losing their homes at record rates right now. People are being thrown out of their homes. Some people who live in apartments are paying their rent and doing everything they have to do, but they're being thrown out onto the street because the renter's place is being foreclosed. People are losing their homes at record rates. This doesn't have to be this way. And you continue to learn about, you know, in international scene, 30,000 children die every day of starvation in this world, in places like Africa, which have totally embraced the free market, neoliberal, IMF, you name it, and people are still dying of starvation. The Department of Agriculture of this country, which is part of the government, I'm not getting this from a Marxist-Leninist news or something like that, I'm getting this from the Department of Agriculture, says that 11.9% of the families in this country are food insecure, meaning they may not be able to know where their next meal is coming from. That's unconscionable in my opinion. People are being laid off right now. People are being told they've come to work for sometimes 20, 30 years, and they're being told, you know, you worked hard for us, you worked hard, but the economy went up, the economy went down, whatever their bullshit excuse is, you're being thrown out. You don't, you know, and they're being put out of work. And I say this at a time there's a bloody war in Iraq going on. And I'm going to say it straight up. You know, the Democrats, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton might not say it. This war is about oil profits for the ruling class of this country. It is about the rich wanting to expand their wealth and control international oil markets. And I say this at a time that the U.S. is supporting bloody dictators in Saudi Arabia. That the government of Saudi Arabia, the punishment for being gay in Saudi Arabia is to have your head removed. This government says it's defending democracy while supporting that government over there. And so what is it that socialists advocate? What is it that we think should be done about this? We think that the factories and the farms and the banks, they shouldn't belong to this elite. You know, I was taught in school when I was growing up, in this country we have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But one thing I've come to understand as I've become a revolutionary and I've become an activist is that in this country we don't have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We have a government of the rich, by the rich, and for the rich. That's what this system is about. It's the people, the decision-making is not with the masses of people. It's with an elite who controls the banks and the corporations and such. And what we advocate as socialists is that those things should be publicly owned. The people should have control of society. Doesn't that sound like democracy? You know, the people having control of society. You know, if we had control of the society, I want everyone to imagine what we could do if we had control. Instead of profit, if profit wasn't what society was organized around, if society were organized to meet human need, we could make sure that every citizen in this country has a job. We could make sure that everyone is able to see a doctor when they're sick and doesn't have to be in debt the rest of their life if that's the case. We could make sure that everyone has a decent education. We could make sure that sexism and the horrors of racism disappear. We could do so much. But we can't do it as long as profits are in command. Profit doesn't care about you. You care about you. Socialism is, you know, some people say socialism negates the individual. Socialism is about empowering you, the people. We have the capacity to care. The market does not. We are the people. The people should run society. That is what socialists advocate. And that is what we're fighting for. And it's a revolution that's gone on throughout history. The story of socialism is a long, untold story of many heroic struggles of people like Big Bill Haywood, you know, the leader of the industrial workers of the world, people who suffered, people like Angela Davis, who was put on trial for the crime of being a revolutionary. Great things have happened in the history of socialism, and many bad things too as well. But the point is that the people should be in control. You cannot believe in democracy and not be a socialist. Socialism is about the powering of the people. Everyone should have a job. Socialism is about the desire for money, for human need and not for profit. The people should be in control. That is what we advocate, and that's what I hope Tim and I can engage about here tonight. Thank you very much.